Hello, this is Clive Priddle, and this is The Current, and we are in August. We're in high summer here at The Current, so The Current is absolutely going to the beach because it's what everybody does in high summer. So we have a nice clapboard background here, and I'm wearing my Italian beach T-shirt, especially to get in the mood. And I am very happy that we are going to be guided to one of the most intriguing beach resorts by Sarah Blaskey, one of the authors of The GRIFTER'S CLUB. Now, Sarah, your book is about Mar-a-Lago, which is a particular beach resort. I want to know if, let's just start out, how am I doing for the dress code here? Would I get into Mar-a-Lago looking like this?
You know, I don't think so. It would probably depend on how much money you have. But, you know, assuming that your net worth isn't in the billions, no, I think you'd be expected to do what we call like Palm Beach day chic. So you'd be expected to have, you know, sort of a button down, some slacks. You absolutely don't have to wear a tie if it's before 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. But certainly the lack of collar is a problem, and the lack of dollars.
That's very, I'm disappointed that you're assuming that I don't have those dollars, but I do work in publishing, so you're not wrong. So I've got several things wrong here. Now, Mar-a-Lago, of course, it's a Florida mansion. In shall we say, Italianate style, and it is famously owned by the president. It's his club.
That's right.
So it would obviously be difficult for me to get into Mar-a-Lago, even if I had the button-down shirt right and maybe a nice tie. I couldn't just walk into Mar-a-Lago, you know, off the beach, could I, even if I looked the part?
So that's an interesting question. It has happened. Even while the president is in residence and the Secret Service has been there, you know, forming their perimeter. Mar-a-Lago it has actually sort of two waterfronts. One is the intercoastal waterway between Palm Beach, this elite sort of island, and West Palm Beach, which is on the mainland of East Florida, Southeast Florida. So it has the intercoastal waterway. You'd have a hard time getting in there. It's got a big seawall and all of that stuff. But on the other side is the Atlantic Ocean. And there have been a couple of instances that we know of where people have wandered down the beach from other private residencies in Palm Beach and sort of just walked onto the pool deck there. And you know, sometimes these people get caught. There's a very famous situation where a college kid who, you know, was probably bored or something over Thanksgiving wanders away from grandma and grandpa's to see if he can get onto the president's lawn. He did. He was caught by Secret Service and charged with a federal crime. I believe it's a federal crime. I'd have to check to make sure it wasn't state court. But either way, he's charged with the crime and sort of says, oh, yes, that was dumb. There are some other instances that you can read about in the book. But you know, certainly it has been done that you can walk in. I mean, the other sort of thing is it depends on what kind of access you want. You could buy a ticket to a gala, Clive, you know, maybe $700 or $800 later, sometimes more depending on what the gala is. And you could go to Mar-a-Lago for the evening and have the chance to hobnob with the president.
So that sounds cool. $700. That sounds a good deal cheaper than an annual membership or whatever it would take. I assume that's out of my pay grade. So what kind of galas does he host down there?
Sure. So he doesn't really host the galas for the most part. It's, you know, the Red Cross often has its annual charity gala at Mar-a-Lago, which, as you said, is one of the historic mansions left in Florida. It was built by Marjorie Merriweather Post and has long sort of been a venue for hosting big ticket events. So the Red Cross Ball would be one of them. But sometimes smaller charities too, smaller NGOs will also host little galas. I went to one in December that certainly wasn't the sort of big ticket item in Palm Beach like the Red Cross Ball. It was just a luncheon, but it was a chance to see the property. And I think a lot of people buy their way in that way to have a chance to see the president's home.
And do you get to see the president? Is he there much?
He is there very frequently between Thanksgiving and Mother's Day on the weekends. I did not see the president. He was not there the weekend I was there, but certainly on all the major holidays, your chances of seeing him are really good.
So I mean, Sarah, you're an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. You're clearly a very good journalist, and I would expect you to find these things out. But if you know where to find the president in real time and how to get a ticket, doesn't that mean the president is oddly available to anybody who may wish him good or ill, were they to buy that same ticket and follow that same pattern? Do you have any concern for his well-being with him being at Mar-a-Lago and everybody knowing it?
I mean, certainly that has been the concern of Secret Service, federal agents, basically everyone whose job is to protect the president has had serious concerns about this venue because unlike former presidents where, sure, they had a ranch or, they went to Martha's Vineyard on vacation or that kind of thing. Those were private homes and you could control who goes in and out. But as you said, at the President's Club, there are so many people going in and out. It's both his home and a club and a country club that people pay a lot of money to get into. And so there's sort of this tension between keeping your members who pay $200,000, $250,000 membership fees, initiation fees, I should say, and then pay an annual fee on top of that, keeping them happy and making them feel like they're part of an elite world, and then also protecting the president and sort of how that has played out has been very interesting. And I think probably, caused a lot of gray hairs for young Secret Service agents tasked with trying to protect one of the most porous locations a president has ever, spent a lot of time at.
Yeah, that sounds a little alarming. So let's assume that I'm probably not going to get that membership or be invited to Mar-a-Lago anytime soon. Although if the president is watching, I would be delighted to come. But if I were to ask you to be my guide to maybe the interior, because I guess many of us have seen some photos of the outside of this place, I've seen relatively few shots of the inside. I've seen one room I think you talk about in the book, which is gilded, like with gold, gold in the paint. This sounds a little campy for my taste, but tell us about the inside of that.
So I think campy is sort of Donald Trump's style, generally speaking, if you've ever been to one of his hotels or resorts that he's built up from the ground. But Mar-a-Lago is different because Mar-a-Lago was built by Marjorie Merriweather Post, who was this socialite at the beginning of the 20th century who had traveled extensively. And so, as you mentioned, it sort of has, tiles from a castle in Cuba, and it has paintings that are reminiscent of a palace in Italy. And she really spared no expense in decorating and curating this property. The outdoor terrace is made of stone that she actually picked from her own property. They've been sort of sea washed to be smooth. And so everything at Mar-a-Lago is curated to sort of early 20th century eclectic perfection, and it's gorgeous. You walk in and you pass all kinds of statues and artworks, and it is gilded. It's the kind of detailing on all of the crown molding and all of the pillars and all of that. And I'm not an architecture expert, and there are people that can sort of tell you specifically what those different things are called. That's not me, but I can tell you it's impressive. And you sort of walk in, and there's the main foyer past the secretary's desk into the main foyer, which is there's a set of couches, and there's always this big sort of bouquet of flowers. And you've seen that pictured when Xi Jinping comes or when Shinzo Abe comes. They're always sitting on those couches. Those couches are originals. Most of the furniture that Donald Trump has at Mar-a-Lago are originals. He actually got it with the purchase of the property. And so because this property is a historic preservation site, Donald Trump has not been able to modify it very much at all. It sort of has all of these restrictions on what he can and cannot do. And yes, there is a lot of gold. But one of the most gilded, one of the most gold things on the property is actually, if you keep walking through that main entrance, you sort of end up at a pool area and you weave through these cloisters that are kind of outside, but kind of inside. And if you hang a left, you end up at the Grand Ballroom, the Donald J. Trump Grand Ballroom. It's one of the only, buildings on the property that Donald Trump commissioned and built himself. And it opened in 2005. And he sort of has this moment when he walks in the first time. He's spent all this money. He has all these like crystal chandeliers. I think there's 17 of them, if memory serves. It's gorgeous. There's like mirrored walls. You kind of think, wow, I'm, in Versailles or something. But he looks up at the ceiling and says, something doesn't look right. And it's because the person who has built this room has used gold paint, not gold leaf, on the sort of intricate detailing of the ceiling. And so I kid you not, Donald Trump says, redo it. And he spends almost as much money putting gold leaf on the ceiling of the Grand Ballroom as he spent to buy the entire property a decade earlier.
It's an elementary mistake. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Failure to use gold leaf when we should. We probably did it on your book as well. I'm really sorry. I think
Unacceptable, Clive. I can't believe it. It's just not as shiny as it should
it's
be.
Just, it's just not. So it's fascinating that Mar-a-Lago, with that exception, with that one room as an exception, doesn't seem to in any way reflect the personality of Donald Trump, perhaps by accident or design. He's living in somebody else's world. So there's no happy portraits of poorly maintained tower blocks in the Rockaways to remind him of his father, and no ruined casinos on Atlantic Beach to remind him of his own earlier triumphs in real estate. None of that.
None of that. But of course, there are lots of things that will remind you that Donald Trump does now own this sort of pillar of high society from the past. For example, you could walk into the library bar and you'll see a sort of famous portrait of Donald Trump in his tennis whites, young Donald Trump, looking all regal. You could go and order a burger for lunch and you get a burger bun with the word Trump stamped in the top. You walk into the main ballroom and you are not confused. This is the Donald J. Trump Grand Ballroom. And so even though he can't change most of it, he certainly has made it his business to remind all of Palm Beach society, which frankly didn't like him when he first came to town, that Donald Trump is here to stay and that they couldn't drive him away.
Can we buy his wine and his ties as well?
I believe so. And if you can't at Mar-a-Lago, you definitely can in Doral, Trump Doral, also in Florida. So just a couple hours drive.
Great. So this is his official mailing address. If we want to write to Donald Trump, in the future when he's no longer president, whenever that may be, we write to him at Mar-a-Lago, right?
Yeah, he changed his official domicile last year to Mar-a-Lago, and sort of the way people who live in Palm Beach, or at least live in Palm Beach half the year, see it, is it was just Donald Trump sort of making legitimate what everyone has always known, that his home, the place he feels best, the place he lives, is Palm Beach, Florida.
And who are his lucky political representatives to whom he'll be writing in years to come saying, can you trim the bushes, and there's a bit of a snarl up on the highway?
So that will depend on the years to come, but certainly the area of Palm Beach is part of the part of Florida that is, very Democrat. It tends to be a blue county, and a lot of the sort of congressional districts are still very much dominated by Democrats, unlike the rest of the state of Florida, if you're familiar, which is largely Republican. But Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami are sort of traditionally, for as long as we can remember, very Democrat. It's interesting now that Donald Trump has become president, there is a sort of resurgence of the Florida Republican Party really making an effort in Palm Beach to run some sort of different grassroots candidates to see if they can put up a viable alternative to sort of the entrenched Democrats there, like Lois Frankel and others. So it will be interesting to see if they're successful. They have it would be a long road. It's nearly unprecedented for that area.
Yeah, Florida is famously a purple state, but he's trailing Joe Biden by a margin in Florida, it seems, and I imagine that's especially true of those areas that skew Democrat anyway. Maybe, he hasn't been a Republican for all that long. Maybe he'll switch back to being an independent or a Democrat again in the future, and then he'll feel comfortable with his local representative. It'll all work out for Donald. We know that.
It often does. That's sort of what his life story tells us, is that he's often successful in, getting through situations that might trip other people up. It's funny that you mentioned that he hasn't always been a Republican. Certainly some of his oldest friends who he does know through Mar-a-Lago would argue that he is still not a Republican. He is Donald Trump. His political brand, his business brand, everything about him is Donald Trump. And when you're Donald Trump, you don't necessarily really care about the way the lines used to be drawn. You draw your own lines and then dare people to challenge them.
Yeah, well, I think that suits the king and his castle, and that, of course, is the picture of Mar-a-Lago that we get from your book, which is really terrific and a lot of fun. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit more, since I'm clearly not going to meet them, about the courtiers who come to the castle, because who are these people who have $250,000 to drop on membership and then their annual dues, and what are they getting for their money? Is this a good country club?
So, all good questions. It depends on who you ask if it's a good country club. Certainly, most Palm Beachers would tell you that the property is gorgeous and that there is an incredible sort of historical, an attempt to maintain this property that is admirable. But I would say that your sort of traditional Palm Beachers who are from generational wealth and the sort of aristocracy of the United States, if you can call it that, certainly do not think that Mar-a-Lago is a elite country club. I think they'd call it AAA. In fact, I've heard people say that. The reason that they think that largely is because anyone can join with enough money. I've heard someone say, if your parents didn't come over on the Mayflower, you're never getting into the Everglades Club or Bath and Tennis, the sort of traditional Palm Beach country clubs. But at Mar-a-Lago, if you have the entry fee, you can probably get a membership, assuming that Donald Trump likes you. And so that immediately diminishes the value to many Palm Beachers. But others who have been sort of left out by that society, newer wealth. Mar-a-Lago was the first country club in Palm Beach to allow Black members. It was that way largely because when Donald Trump converted it to a club, he knew he wasn't going to poach members from other clubs. He had to sort of capitalize on all of the people left over who were sort of moving to Palm Beach because they had more money, because it is this place where wealth goes to vacation, but this is new wealth. And so new wealth, people of color. There was one Jewish club in Palm Beach, the Palm Beach Country Club, but only one. And so Mar-a-Lago sort of took in whoever could pay. And that's kind of what made it different and special in the 1990s. You asked me who the new members were, who the people are that can be there. And, the new members, he largely doesn't know. They have been charged $250,000. They could be, sometimes they're Chinese businessmen. Sometimes they're other people just sort of, there's one of his business partners from Dubai is a member more recently. But then you have sort of the old guard. And the old guard didn't pay even close to what people are paying now to be there. They've sort of been there from the beginning. They are those outsiders that sort of band around Donald Trump. And those are his friends. Those are the people that he asks for advice. Those are the people that he feels as close as he can to. I mean, certainly Donald Trump is known for trusting his family over anyone else, but you get the sense from Mar-a-Lago that sort of old guard at Mar-a-Lago is kind of part of the extended family. And that would include, Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. He is sort of in that old crowd. Ike Perlmutter, the CEO of Marvel, these names that we sort of heard trickle out over the years are part of his in crowd. And those are the people who actually do have access in a way that if you're a newer member, Donald Trump probably doesn't care about you as much. I mean, he'll give you the handshake, but you're not in that inner circle, that
I was going to say, that's probably quite literal, isn't it? And there must be tables and then outer tables and then outer tables at Mar-a-Lago, and presumably Trump is at the center of the bullseye, and that group of friends that you're talking are around the black center of the bullseye, and then if you're in the yellows or the reds, then they're kind of distant across the room, presumably.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. It's almost like you read my book, because because yes, it's fascinating, this sort of dance that the staff talk about, when they're trying to do table placement. So they have to sort of pick which table Donald Trump is going to want, because Donald Trump gets whatever table he wants. And then they know who his friends are. And there's this sort of spoken but not spoken, rule of who can sit closest around him, especially now, just like you said. And then other people sit outside of that, and the staff try to rotate them. So, if you're not in his inner circle, you're still going to get to sit closer to him sometimes, to feel special, because that also helps sell club memberships at the end of the day. So it's that dance, that balance.
So you mentioned the Chinese just a moment ago. So let's suppose that a Chinese businessman rocks up with his $250,000 for membership, plonks it down, and the club says, sure. What is he or she? What are they buying in terms of access to the president?
Yeah, so that's also a little unclear. I think, certainly when you're a member, you can go every weekend, you can be at dinner, you can hope that when he's leaving dinner, he will sort of pass your table and put his hand on your shoulder, which is something he does, and say, hey, looking good, have you lost weight, or whatever. He's known for those kind of interactions at Mar-a-Lago. And so you certainly could get some FaceTime that you otherwise wouldn't get. Donald Trump is also, especially at Mar-a-Lago, even more than his other clubs, known for saying things like, and I apologize for the language, you might have to bleep me out, but he said things like, I love my members. I don't give a shit about their guests, but I love my members. Like he says that, and he means it. His members are closer to family than his guests. So even if you were buying your tickets to a Red Cross ball and you did get to see him, you're not going to have as much weight with Donald Trump as you would as a member. And frankly, it's a little bit of a gamble, but when you're at Mar-a-Lago in those casual interactions, especially when you're a member and it can happen repeatedly, and he gets to know who you are, you do have the chance to be like, hey, Mr. President, I've been thinking about, why don't you check out this article? Or I had some thoughts on, you can start planting seeds. And some of his oldest friends are best at this. They know you can't just say, hey, Donald, please do this for me. It's never going to work. But you can start planting and watering. And, that will sometimes, and not always, work to gain you whatever it is you want. And that has worked in gaining people powerful positions in government, sort of overseeing the Veterans Affairs, the Office of Veterans Affairs, that kind of thing, and more subtle things, the people you can introduce to the president. Former presidents of Colombia, for example, were once brought to be introduced to Donald Trump by one of his members to talk about policy in Venezuela. These are sort of the interesting little interactions that we don't see when we're not at Mar-a-Lago. There's sort of this concept of the reason you'd want to read about Mar-a-Lago is because it's the president's home, and don't you want to know what the president is like at home? And certainly there's a lot of merit to that. But I think what this book is actually about, it's about the way that these people who are, sort of closely intertwined with the president because they all share this place that matters a lot to them, this place, Mar-a-Lago. It's a book written largely from their perspectives. And often when we read about Donald Trump, it's from some insider who's now an outcast, right? Someone who was part of the administration in Washington, but has sort of gotten the boot, or, a family member who, maybe didn't always hit the in crowd of the family. And so these books that are often written about the president, which are revelatory and important, are written from the perspective of people who are deeply bitter. The GRIFTER'S CLUB is written from the perspective largely of people who admire and understand the President of the United States. And so in addition to it being this kind of crazy cast of characters with stories that I talked to Carl Hiaasen. Carl Hiaasen said to me, you can't make this stuff up if you try. These are real life characters. I mean, Mar-a-Lago is this sort of larger than life experience. It's an interesting read to see a life that you wouldn't normally see, but it's also interesting to see the president through the eyes of people who like him, who make money off of him, who want to be near him for some reason. And that's not to say the book is without a critique of, you know, the finances or whatever. It certainly has all of those elements too. But I do think these people offer really interesting insights into someone that some of them call friend.
Well, I think that's great, and it sounds like it's a perfect bit of beach reading for the rest of us, those who can't make it down to Florida or for whom the membership is slightly intimidating. Your book is not intimidating at all, very attractively and economically priced. We can all afford that membership. And Sarah, I want to thank you so much for inviting us to spend a little time on the beach of Florida with you today. Congratulations to you and your co-authors on the book. And thank you for joining us on The Current.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know if you do. Hachette.